Welcome to the Podunk Polymath, a podcast dedicated to the sentiments of a secular, sarcastic, screwed-up Southern SJW and skeptic. I'm your host, Chris. Come on in. This is episode 12 of the Podunk Polymath Podcast. I wanted to first start off with a review I just got on iTunes from somebody who's going to be in the next segment, which I will explain later, for the Palaver Special Edition. Katie Quiznos is what she calls herself. The title is Podunk Polymath Podcast Positively is Positively Pleasant. Pretty clever with the alliteration. I love this show. The host makes you feel welcome and like you're having a conversation with a friend. Well, that's very sweet of you. Thank you, Katie. She also actually sent me an email because, well, let me go ahead and read the email first. And I'll explain to you why she sent me an email in the first place. She says, I adore the show. The palaver always makes me grin. It makes me think of the Dark Tower, which I didn't even think of when I actually did it when I came up with it. I just like alliteration. It kind of went with the whole, I don't know, the Western theme or something. The Southern theme, Southwest, I don't know. And I love how at the beginning you say welcome and come in. It just makes me feel like I'm listening to someone who's in the same room, if that makes sense. And it does. She said, I'm rambling. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you, Katie. And I'll tell you what this show is about, why she emailed me. This is a special episode about depression. I'm going to go ahead and issue a content note now, in case this is something, because I know it's something I deal with, and you may not be wanting to hear about, because we basically tell our experiences and we read stories of other people's experiences with depression. So if it's something you have difficulty dealing with or whatever, you can just skip this episode maybe and come back to it later or not. It's up to you. But yeah, she was one of the ones. She actually sent an audio clip and let me use her name. Her actual name is Katie Kano. I can't Kano. It's French. And I'm supposed to be good at French, but for some reason I can't pronounce it correctly, so sorry for slaughtering your name probably for the 100th time, Katie. So yeah, this episode's about depression. I think it's important to get it out there and talk about it, and I know a lot of people suffer in silence, but it's been my experience that talking about it really helps. I'm sorry for my voice right now. I'm doing the intro as I do about a week after the fact, and I don't sound great on the palaver either, but I've gotten worse. This weather is really screwing with my voice, so forgive that. I hope you listen to this, and maybe if you're going through something, maybe it'll help you out, and maybe it'll help you to, know that you're not alone, and that there are other people who are going through the same thing you are, and maybe you can seek help or somebody to talk to or whatever. And of course, as I said during the show, you can always message me or call the call online or whatever. So we're going to go ahead and go on to the segment.
Do you know where Saskatchewan is? Probably not. It's in Canada. If you do, you might know a city named Regina. In Regina, there's a studio. And in that studio, there are, at least once a month, a bunch of skeptical atheist geeks and goofballs who get together to do a podcast. We are the Brainstorm crew, and we're trying to help spread a bit of reason and critical thinking while still having fun. Never taking things too seriously, but still not accepting everything we're told. We go through different topics, exploring them in depth and often disagreeing. We try to stick to provable facts, and we never trust a myth. That's why we say we're woo-free since 2013. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spreaker under Brainstorm, or check out our website, brainstormblog.net. I can't promise you'll always agree with us, but I can promise you'll have fun listening to us.
Has In God We Trust invaded your town? Are you tired of government officials who want to plaster In God We Trust on taxpayer-owned property? Are you afraid because your local sheriff placed an In God We Trust decal on the patrol cars? We are here to help. The Original Motto Project is for those who feel the separation of church and state is an important issue and should be honored regardless of your belief or lack thereof. Theists, non-theists, and all free thinkers are welcome. We need your support to show politicians that diversity exists within our nation, and their promotion of a monotheistic religion and push for theocracy will not be tolerated. Stand up and be heard. Join us at originalmotto.us.
Welcome to another edition of The Palaver here on the Podunk Polymath Podcast. This is a special edition We'll be talking about a rather dour subject, depression, but it's something that needs to be discussed as I don't think enough people talk about it, and it's got too much of a stigma in this country. I have with me this week a friend of mine who I've known since high school who has dealt with depression, and I thought would be a good guy to have on to talk about it. His name is Eric Parsons. How you doing, Eric?
Very good.
Why don't you give the listeners a brief rundown of who you are and how we know each other?
Well, my name is Eric Parsons, and I've known Chris since... actually, before high school, junior high, I think, 7th grade. So we go quite a ways back, and he's very familiar with my backstory as I am with his, so...
Oh, good.
Yes.
Blackmail material, if anybody decides to run for office or anything. Because, I'm big on running for office. Anyway, so, yeah, like I said, then we're going to be talking about depression on this episode. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I know your story so well, like you said, and you have dealt with depression on a regular basis since I've known you. Give us a kind of a brief history of how your depression started and how you've kind of dealt with it.
Well, actually, it goes back for just about as far as I can remember. It started out when I think as early as age 4. I had some vivid memories of being anxiety-ridden as a child. I think there were some attachment issues there, but I'm not really totally sure as to why that would be the case. But I dealt with anxiety off and on as a child, and then when I hit puberty, it was just like a powder keg exploded. It was full-blown depression, and it's something ever since then I've struggled with for most of my life, my entire life, basically. So, yeah.
Well, I recall visiting you at St. Thomas Psychiatric Ward, I believe it was, when we were in high school. I came up there with our mutual friend Babalu. Everybody loved Babalu. He had the duster, the big pimpin' in the duster. And we came up there to visit you, and I don't recall exactly what the circumstances were, what led up to that. Can you kind of...
Yeah, it was my junior year in high school. And at that point, gosh, for a good 3-4 years, I'd been on a pretty steady regimen of various antidepressants. And, I was going to a psychiatrist at the time who, there really weren't a lot of options available at that time. We were talking about the 80s, and Prozac was kind of the it drug at that time as far as the SSRIs are concerned. And, we tried that. We tried basically every available option at that time. And it just got to a point where it was getting unbearable. It was still rearing its head. So my doctor said, well, we're going to try you on an MAO inhibitor. And at that time, that was kind of cutting edge. Now it's fairly commonplace. It's not a first line of treatment by any means, but it was still rather new at the time. So luckily my doctor was kind of had his fingers on the pulse as far as treatments were concerned. So as a result of that, you have to spend a couple of weeks at least off of any previous medications, any previous antidepressants, SSRIs that I was on at the time. So you need a bit of a washout period, and he thought it was in my best interest that, well, we'll put you into a facility. And it wasn't like a full-blown, mental hospital with padded walls or anything. This is pretty mild run-of-the-mill mental disorders, which I don't know if there's such a thing. But so it was basically just a way to just keep me under observation while I got whatever antidepressants I was on at the time, kind of coming off of those and starting on the MAO inhibitors, which changed my life for the better for a number of years. It worked wonders for me, but then they pooped out, sure enough. But I guess we'll get to that at another point. So that's why I was in there, basically.
Okay. Incidentally, I'm going to be coughing occasionally. So, and I'll edit it later probably, but if you hear it, it's just the price of admission, baby. Sometimes you gotta pay the price. Sorry, I'm a bit under the weather. Anyway, yeah, so you've been, like you said, I remember that, and I did not know that was basically just kind of of course, at the time, I was like, well, this motherfucker's crazy, I don't know what's up with this fool. But no, of course, that's not a good word to use anyway. But at the time, I thought maybe there was something, because, you think of a mental institution, ward or whatever, you think, oh, well, they must be out of their mind. But of course, that's an issue. Mental illness stigma is an issue anyway, and that's not something we need to, perpetrate or whatever. Perpetuate, not perpetrate, sorry, that's not the right term. Before we go on, I wanted to read a couple of factoids about depression I got from the National Institutes of Mental Health, NIM. And if anybody's read the book, it's a great book. Miss Bimby? I forgot her name. NIMBY. Miss Nimby and the Rats and Nim. I joke, but I really did enjoy it, and the movie was cool too. Anyway, so according to the World Health Organization, major depression carries the heaviest burden of disability among mental and behavioral disorders. Specifically, major depression accounts for 3.7% of all U.S. disability-adjusted life years and 8.3% of all U.S. years lived with disability. Pretty fucking big percentage for one thing. The 12-month prevalence data for major depressive episode presented here are from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, based on the 4th edition of the DSM-4. Everybody knows that, who knows anything about mental health or is obsessed with it like we are, since you're always got mental health problems. In 2015, an estimated 16.1 million adults aged 18 or older in the U.S. had at least one major depressive episode in the past year, and this number represented about 6.7% of all adults. For some individuals, major depression can result in severe impairments that interfere with or limit one's ability to carry out major life activities. Yes, I can attest to that, and I'm sure many of y'all, Eric, you can attest to that as well, I'm sure. In 2015, an estimated 10.3 million adults aged 18 or older in the U.S. had at least one major depressive episode in the past year with severe impairment. This number represents about 4.3% of all U.S. adults. So we're dealing with a pretty major problem here. Now, I'm sure most of y'all know that we are not very good in this country about dealing with mental health. And you can do your own research, but from what I've seen, most mental health is dealt with in either of a couple of ways, especially when it comes to criminality. They put them in prison a lot of times and somehow don't give them any treatment and think somehow putting them in jail is going to help. In fact, a lot of people who have mental illnesses end up in prison and they don't get adequate treatment. Even if you are somebody who can afford the treatment and earn a decent job or something, a lot of times it's out of your price range or you can't get help. And there's a stigma attached to mental health. For some reason, even today, it's still not considered the same level as a physical impairment. A lot of people are like, well, just get over it, go take a walk outside, and shit like that. Would you tell a cancer patient the same fucking thing? I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah. So anyway, kind of giving that background, let's delve a little deeper into what you've been through. Mm-hmm. You don't have to give a complete history, obviously, but I know that since I've known you, you've been on at least 3 or 4 different types of medication to deal with your illness, I guess.
Yeah, far more than that. I'm a walking apothecary.
Yes, indeed you are. From what I can recall, the one, just as an anecdotal thing, I remember thinking he was on MAOIs and he couldn't drink beer or eat pizza. And I'm like, just kill me. There's no fucking way I can do it.
That's pretty hellish, yeah.
But you said it helped you out. So
It did. It really, it kind of changed the game for me because I was still functioning. I mean, I was still able to keep up a good front in high school. My grades never really, went down the tubes or anything like that. I was still there for classes and stuff like that. But it got to a point where, and at a certain point, I had been on every tricyclic and SSRI at that point. So when they made the switch over to the MAO inhibitors, it's a highly restrictive diet. First of all, you can't be on anything as far as like anything that's aged or fermented, as far as breads. Not, of course, obviously alcohol falls in that category. Cheeses. So it restricted my diet, but as I'm sure many people listening to this right now that deal with this, it's a small price to pay. It really is, for the quality of life. So I was on, it was only, I think, 2 MAOIs that I was on. The first one, and I don't remember their names now. It's been so long. But the first one worked really well for a couple of years and then pooped out. which is, I'm sure a lot of people know that's dealing with this. That's kind of commonplace with a lot of the antidepressant therapies out there. After a while, they work great for a while, and then they kind of lose their effectiveness over time. And then I was on a second one for a number of years that worked just as well. But in retrospect, well, looking back, I think, I don't know, I still kind of felt depressed even when I was on those. So, I'm not going to lie, they quite honestly saved my life at one time. And I don't know where I would be had I not had those treatments available to me at that time. But as years have gone on, I've kind of found a way to manage living without having to rely on those treatments. But unfortunately, not everybody can. A lot of people, they need it to live. Like Chris was saying, you wouldn't tell somebody with a cancer patient, you wouldn't tell a cancer patient to walk it off. There's a stigma attached, and it's something that I think the country really needs to address, strip away the shame. But yeah, that's pretty much, I kind of went off tangent there, but that was pretty much my experience with MAOIs.
So let's get kind of the feel-like factor. What does it feel like? How do you feel when you get into these episodes or whatever?
I think it's probably the closest you could get to like hell on earth. I'm being melodramatic, but
not really.
Well, I mean, you get to a point where you really basically can't function. I mean, you talk about, I was never at the point where I was, lying in a pool of my own feces or anything like that. But it gets to a point where you're, where you're contemplating whether you have the energy to get up out of bed and use the bathroom. It really does affect you that badly. So, and of course, with that, obviously, any sort of joy or emotion or anything you get any sort of fulfillment from in life is just stripped away. It's useless. I mean, for me, my love's always been music. It gets to a point where even that doesn't register anymore. So you basically lose all joy in life. You don't see any purpose in anything. And your body does kind of shut down when you think about it. Depression's a central nervous system disorder. And so it's not one of those things where, and this is, I think my biggest gripe, and what I would have to tell most people that don't have to deal with depression, is that I think depression's just the wrong word for it. I don't think there is a word for it. It's worse than depression, than what we consider to be depression. You tell somebody you say depression to someone who's never dealt with it, they're like, "Oh, so you're sad." No, well, it's a lot. There's a lot more to it than that. I just think there should be a different word, different verbiage, something. I don't know.
Well, typically they use clinical depression to describe what we're talking about.
But still, people, especially in this day and age, they want the, short and easy approach to something. And so, that's, clinical depression, same thing. Mm-hmm. And it's not. It's two totally different things. Everybody, well, I don't say everybody, but people that deal with what we would term garden variety depression or everyday depression, you can shake it off in a couple of weeks. It's like, things aren't going well now. I lost my job, whatever. I'm going through a divorce, whatever. You eventually bounce back. But people with clinical depression, it's more severe. I mean, we're talking severely limiting in terms of just everyday abilities are concerned. So
you just described not having any energy to do anything, not having any enjoyment out of anything. Would you say those are the major symptoms? Is there?
It just affects every aspect of your life. I mean, you lose your appetite. I know at one point I lost a good 20 pounds as a result of being depressed. I went through a really tough time a good 10, 15 years ago, and I lost a lot of weight. And so even your appetite's suppressed. Any desire or joy in the slightest little thing in life it just evaporates. It's gone. So yeah.
So I think it's important to point out that not everybody has the same symptoms, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about not eating at all. Some people overeat.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
People deal with it differently, but I mean, it's still abnormal behavior overall. I guess I should go ahead and tell briefly my kind of story. My depression didn't really hit until, I'd always kind of been, I guess, maybe a little anxious. Not really, not that bad. I was like introverted maybe, and I was always kind of to myself, maybe a little bit, but not too much. Around the time when I was 19, I think it was, I can recall almost exactly the circumstances. I remember being in Montgomery. They were moving back to Omaha for a job, Dad was, and he had left my stepmother and the new baby, Casey. Of course, that was 20 years ago or something like that. Good Lord. And I was still there, but I had intended on staying with this friend of mine to finish up school in Montgomery. So right at that point, I was just kind of waiting for that to happen, but I was still living with my stepmom and my half-sister. And I remember, for some reason, I want to say I had a hangover from cheap wine.
Story of our life.
Yeah. Of course, I'm always been a bit of an alcoholic, so especially when I was at that age. And you say, wait, you were 19? Yeah, I know, shut up. Okay, I got it in other ways. But anyway, so I was just sitting there on the couch. I don't remember, I was watching TV or something. And I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden, it was the strangest thing. All of a sudden, this feeling came over me like I was about to die for no apparent reason. And my throat started closing up. Now, I want to go ahead and say here that now this is a panic. I was having a panic attack. But panic attacks, anxiety, and depression are all kind of linked together. Most, especially, it went into that, but this is how it started. I had a panic attack. I was freaking the fuck out. My throat was closing up. I started gargling salt water. I don't know why the fuck I thought that was going to do any goddamn thing. Like, oh, maybe it's just my throat. I have an allergic to reaction. You just don't know. And at the time, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a whole lot of resources about this kind of shit. Mental illness, you heard about, but you didn't know much about. I didn't know anything about my history of my family or anything like that. So I literally thought I was dying or something. So that started basically a long, drawn out. Oh my God, how long did it last? It basically put me into a depression / panic. For me, it wasn't just depression, even though it was that too. Like the stuff you described, it was also fear. I just had this horrible anxiety that and everything was just so warped to me. It's hard to describe, I guess. I was listening to music, like you said, music, of course, was a big thing for me. And it was almost like it was warped into something evil or something. It was weird. I couldn't listen to it without it being distorted by my feelings or something. So basically, what was so strange, I hardly ate. I quit smoking and quit drinking caffeine for about 6 months because I thought that had to be it. I was living on base at the time, so I went to the base doctor and she gave me what did she give me? Some fucking Buse Par or some crap. Yeah. It was totally ineffective. All it did was make me dizzy. It didn't do anything. So eventually, I had to quit my job. And I moved back. I just said I have to go to Mom come back to Nashville because that's where my mom was. I knew she'd help me take care of me or whatever. So finally, after it's one of those things where time dilation. I don't have any clue how long it was. It felt like a long time. It may have just been a couple of months. I don't remember exactly. But I finally ended up going to an actual shrink because I was crying all the time. I was freaking out over the stupidest shit. I remember you know how you sleep on your arm sometimes. And my finger was like, I was having muscle spasms in my finger and I was freaking out. I was like, why won't it stop? It was I thought I was losing my fucking mind, literally. Finally, I got on Zoloft, and after a couple of weeks it kicked in. Now, I will say Zoloft wasn't the best all the time. It had a bad habit of being up and down. But it did, I won't say, it saved my life. I won't be that melodramatic because I've never been one of those who have suicide ideation like some people. Which I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm just saying I've never been one of those people. But it definitely did bring me out of this, whatever you want to call it, this hell on earth, like you said. And it does feel that way. Yeah. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand about depression, clinical depression, is that it's not situational, it's chemical mostly. And you can't explain that to somebody who's never been through it really. because they don't understand it. They think of depression as the blues, or temporary sadness, something that's going to blow over or something.
There's really no way to adequately describe what it feels like. It's just an overwhelming sense of dread. It's like this monkey that you can't get off your back, and you feel like you're in quicksand. Basically, it just feels like you're drowning all the time in so many things. So yeah, and the thing about depression too is it magnifies everything. Like, everything is magnified, even the good stuff. When there are those moments, those little rays of light that pop through whenever you're going through a major episode, everything is magnified. And so you can only imagine the slightest little thing, the slightest little mishap can totally throw you off base. And so, yeah, it's no way to live. So
yeah, and like I said back then, of course, Eric's dealt with it for a lot longer. So he was he was still a kid, and so probably he got a better handle on it than I did, because it started with me when I was an adult. And I have never been the type to really ask for a lot of help. I've been always kind of a loner. And so when this happened to me, I didn't know. The only person I knew to go to was Mom. And I waited for a long time, because that's another thing. If you don't know anybody else like you, and you don't know what this is that you're going through, you think you're crazy, and you don't want to tell anybody because you think they might lock you up and throw away the fucking key or something. Mm-hmm. And that's something I went through. And that was something that Mom helped me out with, because I found out there was a history of it in our family. She had it. My grandfather had it. I know my great uncles on one side. One was committed. Another committed suicide. So, I mean, it's there. It's in my family. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't know it. She showed me some books. And I thank my mom a lot for a ton of shit. But helping me get through depression and being there for me when I needed the comfort and the help to get me through it. And to point me in the right direction of how to get help. That's important. I think that's good. Lord have mercy. Having a good support system, you cannot overstate the importance of a good support system when you're in this kind of state. So, I mean, that's another thing. If you have of course, nowadays things are a little different. We have more access to information, right? We have more access to social networks, even though, of course, technically they're not there in person. But people still get a lot. That doesn't mean that people don't get comfort and care out of people online, because they do. I mean, I know I do. Because, I mean, it's great for introverts who don't like to go anywhere. They can talk to people online, and people who are not the biggest fan of going out and being around a lot of people are able to garner that kind of support, and that's fine. But even today, even with all what we know about depression and mental illness in general, we still have this stigma. And like you said, I still don't think there's the kind of support we need in this country for mental illness.
Yeah, there really isn't. I'm starting to see a little bit of attention paid to it. I know there's been some TV campaigns, ad campaigns, and stuff like that. But you're right. There's nothing more important than a good support system in place, because I can't agree with that enough. I was very lucky. I was also very lucky in that my pediatrician is the one who recognized it as depression, what I was dealing with. My mom was, I think, the one to come forth to my doctor when I went in for a checkup when I was a kid. And we're talking about the mid-'80s. And in the mid-'80s, it was a taboo subject. I mean, if you can imagine the stigma attached now, you can only imagine 30 years ago what it was like. And so for my doctor, for my pediatrician to be so aware, to say, you know what, this is what he's dealing with, this is what I think he's dealing with, and we're going to refer him to a psychiatrist. That to me was, I'm extremely fortunate to have been in that situation and been under his care. And you talk about the genetic component as well. You know, I as well come from a line of, you know, there was there was depression in my family. I know that my grandmother, she struggled with agoraphobia. Now, I never had anything like that. I never had any feeling to, you know, I never wanted to not leave the house or anything like that. It was nothing like that. But there was always that element of mental illness. So there is a genetic component. Again, like Chris said, you know, this isn't situational. This is genetic clinical depression. So it's a totally different animal. So
Yeah, I think it's important for people to realize that. And like I said, the stigma needs to go away. And like you said, it slowly, I think it is. I do think medications helped. It helped a great deal. And I really don't appreciate these people who, especially there's this one specific meme that I've been seeing going around about. This is the antidepressant, and it's like the great outdoors, and then this is poison, and it's showing, fucking pills.
Yeah, you gotta love David Wolf.
Well, it's not. I mean, that's a Scientology kind of shit too, though. Because Tom Cruise says some shit like, of course, he's a fuck nut anyway, but he says some shit like that to Brooke Shields because she had said something about her taking something after she had her baby or something like that, I believe. But that kind of shit's harmful and it can kill. And people who have the kind of power and voice to do that, you're murderers. I'm sorry. I mean, you may not have sat there and fucking, slit their throat or, put a rope around their neck or whatever, but you spreading that kind of shit makes people think that's true and they don't take anything for it. They think just going outside is going to help, or some fucking woo bullshit that you've come up with just to make a quick buck. You're killing people. That's my fucking opinion on it. Of course, it may sound extreme, but that's the way I feel about it. I mean, this is an issue that I'm very passionate about, mostly because I've dealt with it my whole life, and I've seen other people deal with it, and I've seen the kind of shit it can do to people. This is not a fucking laughing matter to me, This is serious business. Now, that's not to say, that's another thing. Laughter. They say laughter is the best medicine, and I believe that. I don't say the best medicine. That's kind of oversimplification, but I do believe that trying to laugh about shit and having a gallows humor can help in a lot of instances. I mean, I wouldn't do it I wouldn't want to make anybody else feel uncomfortable. This is just for me, but I have a dark humor anyway. It helps me out sometimes. Would you say that was the case with you, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, totally. I think it just, I don't know. I think it goes along. It's just the nature of the illness. You develop a skewed sense of humor after a while, a perverse sense of humor, and it's true with it. Quite a few of my friends struggle with this. I mean, you're not the only one. I know a lot of other people too. I have some very close friends who struggle with it as well. We do, like you said, gallows humor kind of goes along with it.
Yeah. So I think it's important that people realize that there's some people who think everything has to be serious. And like I said, it certainly is a serious illness. And it's something that we need to contend with in this country and hasn't been contended with enough. I do want to talk a little bit about, without getting overly conspiratorial about it, the pharmaceutical industry in this country is not one I'm greatly fond of. I'll just go ahead and say that. Now, along with every other industry in this country, they have been financialized, which means they are all about profits. And to that point, they only make medicines, they only put research behind medications. I don't want to say always, because like I said, I don't want to make this sound conspiratorial, but I think in a lot of instances, they only put research behind shit they think is going to make any kind of money. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not one of these people who think, there's some big conspiracy to not cure shit because it might not, it makes more money not to cure it. I'm not really of that mindset. I don't think it's that to that level. But I do think some things could be done quicker if the profit motive wasn't such a high priority on their list. I will say that. There have been a lot of medications that have helped a lot of people over the years. Unfortunately, in this country, we cannot negotiate drug prices. It's against the fucking law to negotiate lower drug prices for Medicare. So we end up with people who try to get medication from other countries, Canada, and of course the pharmaceutical industry has a vested interest in you not doing that, so they put out scare campaigns saying shit from Canada is somehow dangerous, which is of course ridiculous. As long as you get it from a reputable pharmacy, I would say that's not the case. Of course, you can have to do your research with anything else, like anything else. But I do think it's a fucking scandal, and I think it's deplorable that pharmaceutical industry seems to be more concerned about their bottom line, and I'm not just singling them out. I think it's more, frankly, I think it's more corporations nowadays, but profit motive is overtaking everything.
Yeah, I think too. The speaking to that is that I don't even, most of the treatments for depression all center around serotonin regulation in the brain, and to be quite honest, that's pretty much been disproven. And even there are tons of psychiatrists out there who will basically say, well, Yeah, we don't know for sure. It's not the silver bullet, so to speak. Now, that's not to say that serotonin-based drugs do not work. They certainly worked for me. But I don't think that the people who are coming up with these treatments really know the true nature. I mean, the brain's the most complex organ in the body. I hear everything from it's a result of problems in the hippocampus to serotonin regulation to all sorts of things. There's also a lot of new therapies coming about, like transcranial magnetic stimulation, which, that's some pseudoscience stuff. There's a lot of people that claim it works, but, the majority of the insurance companies aren't willing to cover a $15,000 procedure to get someone past their depression. So it's just, I just think it's a best guess on their part. I don't think they truly know at the end of the day, but I'm not here to knock any depressants at all. Like I said, I mean, they've certainly helped me. I know they've helped Chris. I don't really depend on them anymore, but they've saved a lot of people's lives. I mean, I was never at the point where I was, I never got to the point of suicidal ideation. Yeah, I can't pronounce things tonight.
That's fine.
So anyway, but I was never to that point. I never got to that point. But there are times when you struggle with this, and you're just like, "What's the point? Why am I even here?" And you start contemplating that stuff. I never got to the point where I was just like, well, I'm going to put a bullet in my, I never got that far, I was never that bad off. But I was pretty close to non-functional. Yeah. So,
I've been there. I want to mention an idiosyncratic thing that I deal with, and it's kind of strange, and people might think it's strange. I have an irrational fear of going blind.
I never knew that.
Yeah. And it still happens now. It's kind of reared its head again. When I was going through it initially, the first time when I was hanging out with Clint, and he was going through it too. I won't mention it. He didn't get it, but I'm sure he wouldn't care. Our mutual friend Clint, I used to hang out with him when he was going to Vanderbilt, and we were going through depression at the same time. It was lovely, let me tell you. But anyway, I can remember hanging out. I'm like, man, and it was just so weird. I was sitting there. Wouldn't it be horrible if I went blind and I'd just sit there, blink my eye? And I'm doing it now because I still have these, like, it's so strange and it doesn't make any rational sense. But I have, and for some reason, the reason
it's the masturbation.
It must be. But you remember Terry Gilliam? He was doing Brazil. I heard that he went blind from stress. That's, for some reason, that's stuck in my fucking head. And I'm like, oh shit, what if I go blind from stress? What the fuck? What am I going to do? I mean, this is the kind of shit that goes through your head when you're dealing with, I mean, do you have any idiocy?
Yeah, I mean, I have all sorts of stuff. My thing is now more, I don't really, depression doesn't really, I've luckily been able to shake that off in recent years for whatever reason. Whatever it is, I'm eternally grateful. I don't know if it's just age or the fact that I'm just so used to it at this point. I know how to deal with it. I don't know. I don't know if I just gave myself the tools along the way, but as far as coping. But yeah, I deal with anxiety constantly, and it manifests in several ways. It could be like heart palpitations one day, and you're like, oh my God, I've got a heart disorder. Oh my God, I better go to the doctor about this. Or you've got a really bad. I went through something a few years ago where I was sure that I had colon cancer.
Yes, I remember.
You remember this? This was a real winner. I was just like, you know what? I think, oh my God, all this stuff. I'm having stomach problems and going to the bathroom and all this other shit. So, and of course, everything was fine. That's the thing. Your brain is telling you there is something wrong, and in fact, there really isn't. There's really nothing there that's wrong except for, the illness itself. So, yeah, I've dealt with all sorts of things. The heart stuff, colon cancer, thinking, oh my God, my kidneys are shutting down. I haven't peed in 3 hours. Oh my God, what the hell's going on? That's the kind of stuff that you go through. And so for me, it's been kind of a revolving door.
Well, hypochondria seems to be
exactly.
Seems to be your thing.
Yeah, that's kind of my shtick.
Yeah, we were living together. It was constant fucking, I thought I was living with fucking Seinfeld or something. Oh my goodness, my fucking kidneys, what's going on? Forget it. Okay, anyway.
Pretty much, yeah. Thrill a minute.
Yeah, it was good stuff between the drinking and the hypochondria.
It's a nice balance.
Yeah, so I asked for submissions of people wanting to tell their stories, and I actually have one audio file, and I'll play that after this, but all these people chose to remain anonymous, so I'm going to read some of these. This is from a friend. One of my recent depression tales. 2 years ago, I worked as a manager in a dead-end job, think under the hat, and knew that life had no real options for me since I spent 8 years of my life hoping for an opportunity that would never come. Around that time, the woman who I was planning on proposing to left me to return to her abusive ex. I got the opportunity I was looking for, a chance to shift to a much more busy but profitable store with the understanding that I would take over as the assistant manager. It was just myself, the GM, and one other manager running the store 7 days a week. At the second week mark, my GM abruptly quits and I get promoted. I didn't get any training on how to do things, just got thrown into it. Yeah, that's happened to me. So I'm doing the best I could despite my boss constantly sabotaging my attempts at fixing that store. Work crazy long hours, think 7 days a week, 2 days of open to close so I could let my other manager rest. Fuck that. I finally started to crack from the strain of working in a job I hated, missing the woman I loved, to dealing with overwhelming pressure to survive and make the store profitable. I cracked and begged for help. Then they bring me in my abusive former boss. That's great. She hated me from the moment we met, constantly yelling at me and shining me for stupid stuff that she would let other managers get away with, stringing me on with lies as to getting promoted, and when the shit ending the fan, throwing me under the bus. The worst of it was when she started to insult my intelligence in front of the employees. I always have a sore spot when people call me stupid. Yeah, me too, actually. Even more so when it was from a person who wasn't even high school educated. Exactly. That drives me up the fucking wall. I tried to make it work, continuing to put in crazy long hours off the clock to make sure that everything was perfect for her in the morning, but it never was. I would get chided and yelled at on a constant basis until finally I had enough. I started to contemplate suicide, knowing full well that I was a useless sack of shit that nobody, not even myself, would find useful. I have always had a problem with suicidal depression, but this was the worst I have had to deal with since I was a teen. Then I quit the abusive job and took a job in the laboratory. I was so ecstatic that somebody thought highly enough about me to give me a shot. I threw myself into that job just as hard as I did the previous one, working late nights and doing extra work as they required. Then I got fired because I didn't get trained in the position they wanted me to take over, because the girl there didn't want to risk losing her cushy job. Their excuse was that I didn't pick it up quickly enough and lacked focus. I fell into a massive depression, now unemployed for the first time in my adult life. All my hopes and dreams shattered and unable to find a decent job because of my time spent in fast food. I began to listen to that fucking voice inside of my head that told me I was worthless, useless, unlovable. I honestly started to play with my pistol, wondering each day if it would be the right day. One day I had my mother tell me that I never should have left the restaurant job because I was merely unhappy with it. I broke down then, told her that I had been in a spiral of depression and genuinely thought of suicide every day, and finally realized I needed help. I hate psychiatrists. I have been to dozens since I was barely in my teens, I'm 34 now, and none of them could make me open up about the reasons I hated everything, including myself. Not only did I hate them for their inability to find out the cause of things, I hated their secrecy. They always hid from you what they were observing and trying to coax you into coming into a startling realization so they could bask in the warm glow of success. But I knew if I didn't talk to someone, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. Ushered through 3 people who interviewed me and one who talked to me on a frequent basis, they convinced me to do something I dreaded most of all, take medication. I remembered how the former meds made me feel as a kid, unable to feel anything, no joy or sadness, only the anger that came from not being able to feel anything else. But I decided that I needed to do something different because I would never change for the better if I didn't. I got lucky and the first medicine they gave me was the right one. It took out my severe lows and let me feel better. By itself, I wouldn't consider it to be much, but then I snapped at my last therapist, telling her that I didn't trust them because they were so secretive, and was shocked when she offered to pull out all my records to show me what they have written. Turns out all 3 therapists diagnosed me with PTSD thanks to the restaurant and severe depression, which wasn't a surprise. Suddenly the worst of my symptoms made sense. I could focus on dealing with the PTSD since I understood my triggers, and the medication allowed me to finally find the focus I needed to get back on my feet. I know this is rather long, but this has been my most recent struggle, and one that I still fight with every day. That's fine. Depression isn't something that can be conquered through good thoughts or just getting over it, as we've already previously stated. It isn't being lazy or just antisocial. It is crippling in your daily life, that uncertainty that you will never succeed, the knowledge that you are worthless and weak, and with the despair that comes along with it. It is fighting with yourself just to do simple things like showering and eating properly. Yeah. If you're reading this, you aren't going through the struggle alone. Or hearing this. Don't give in to that bastard in your head that tells you that you're worthless and weak. It is not weakness to seek help with it. And you are not a loser or weakling to do so. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. You're fighting the hardest fight every day. And it's with yourself. You are the ultimate badass and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Man, I know this dude. I don't know him personally, but I'm going to meet him soon.
You're right. That's the thing, man. You know, depression can be so debilitating that the individual feels like they are the weakest, most useless sack of shit on the face of the planet. They feel beat down constantly by their own head, you know. So by their own brain. So what, you know, there's people suffering out there. I just gotta say, man, you're all like Muhammad Ali. I mean, you're struggling. Think about this. You are like Chris just said. You're in a battle. Like this gentleman just said. You're in a struggle 24/7 with your own body, your own brain, and you're winning every day that you wake up. So keep that in mind. I mean, I'm not trying to blow some sunshine up anybody's ass, but it's true. I mean, nobody knows, and you, like I said, you can't describe to somebody what depression is like. There's just no way to put a label on it. So,
and he wrote a little something. He said, "I guess a summer league would probably have been more useful to you," which I don't give a fuck. That was cool as fuck too, but. He said, depression isn't one tiny thing. You aren't just sad or down in the dumps. It also isn't something that goes away easily. It's a weight that is always on you, making life difficult and sometimes impossible to deal with. For me, it manifests as my own condescending voice whenever I try and do something. I succeed at a task, and it will be there whispering about how shitty I did or how useless my contributions were. Sometimes it doesn't manifest as anything tangible at all. Often depression took the form of exceptionally long sleep. That's me. At the peak when I was in high school, I slept 20 hours a day, only getting up and use the bathroom. Dude,
wow. Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
But one thing that was always present was the crippling self-doubt that it caused. I never tried to move up in the company because I was afraid people would see me as a fraud. Yeah. I never tried to hit on a woman because somebody, obviously she could never like a fatty like me. I never tried to improve my life because I would obviously fuck it up completely. When I was in college, not high school, it would have been really hard to graduate high school with sleeping 20 hours. But you get the point. And then he says, I'll stop blowing up your phone now. Fuck you, you should have blown it up some more. But I mean, I know this guy. I've conversed with him before, and he's a great guy. And he's good people, so I want to thank him for sending me that story.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This is another, I would say friend of ours, we both. A few thoughts on depression. It's pervasive. We don't have a healthy society, and to boot, we don't regard mental health seriously in an institutional sense, so we suffer greatly in small ways and large ways. It's largely responsible for our national troubles. There is feeling depressed over a daily trial. Then there is, in all caps, depression, which we've talked about. I call it clinical depression. When you're in it and time goes by, it becomes normal. You don't know any different, and you may not even realize the extent of your suffering at all. Because it becomes normal, your everyday, you don't even know anything different. It complicates life, ends relationships, compromises family and friendships, because it keeps you from communicating. We become the silent man, the silent woman, the silent creature who suffers. Talking is the way out. Writing is the way out. Moving your body is the way out. Getting help, whatever form it takes. We've all been wounded, and at some point we'll need it just as surely as we'll need antibiotic surgery or pain medication at some point. And we've come... Emotional, mental illness, and physical illness, the same fucking thing. Quit trying to treat them differently, even though the stigma attached to mental illness. That's my aside. He didn't say that. Taking the step to helping yourself is the hardest because everything feels hopeless, and you wonder, what's the point? Depression is all you've ever known, and there is a strange complacence, a status quo you have to move to get better. You have to start to change, and those things seem insurmountable. But so often the alternative is a living death, existing, not living, and if you want to live, when you're ready, you will start to move. and once started, keep moving. I know this person, and he's fucking hell of a writer on top of everything else.
Yeah.
Just more,
And I could speak this to him. He's like a brother to me, and he's struggled, and he's found his own way. And I saw him not too long ago, and I just got to say, I've the utmost respect for this man because he's battled the odds his entire life, and he's struggled, but he's pulled through it like a champ, and he's found his own way to deal with it. For him, it's more, he finds exercise to be a great outlet for him, which I understand. He always says you got to keep moving, and that's something that I'm going to take an offside here to talk about one of my favorite bands, Rush. I've always got to throw it. But Neil Peart, the drummer and lyricist for Rush, went through a horrific time after losing his wife and his daughter within a few months of each other. And for him, movement, his story is he journeyed on his motorcycle from Canada down to Mexico. And for him, that was the best therapy. He was alone. It was a solemn trip, but he found that movement was his therapy. And this mutual friend of ours found that worked for him as well. And I've even found that to work for me. Unfortunately, I find that, I will say this, if I do try to keep active and keep my mind active and physically active, I do feel better. The problem is with me is I'm kind of a lazy sack of shit at the end of the day, and I don't have the discipline. But the thing about it is, when I do, and I do stick with it, and I discipline myself, I feel tons, just shitloads better, but it's hard for me sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard for me all the time.
Yeah.
I'm sedentary by nature.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that if I get out and actually start moving around, then I'm fine generally. But it's taking that first step or first roll out of bed or whatever to make it happen.
Yeah.
It's the hardest one, and a lot of times just fucking watching Netflix and shit. It's just, I'm like, I got so much shit to do. But I haven't finished Luke Cage, fuck it. Or I gotta
Porn.
No, not so much anymore since I have no libido since I'm depressed. But anyway, that's another. That is, sexual dysfunction is, I'm sure as many of you know, can be a symptom of depression, and I've encountered that many times. So.
It's also a symptom of the medications as well. It's also a side effect of the medications.
That can be true. I know that before it actually takes hold for me, I know that the first couple of weeks, before it really kicks in or whatever, you can know. You might as well just, you can be fucking whoever. J-Law or whatever, butt naked, and it wouldn't matter. I'm sure everybody wanted to know that. But sexual dysfunction is a symptom, so it's a legitimate subject. I also have a story from somebody who does not mind being identified. Her name's, Bridget Fitch. It's not really her real name, but I know who this person is. Bridget Fitch.
I like that. It's got a nice one. Yeah.
Bridget. Anyway. She's been diagnosed with, and I've talked to her before, a couple times. She's been diagnosed with bipolar and had her first major depressive episode when she was 7. She's on meds and still in therapy and promises not to go off on a tangent about PTSD and mania. Oh, Lord. I can use her name. She has a blog, actually. Bridget Fitch has a blog about dealing with depression called Between the Wheels, so some of her/my stuff is already out there in public anyway. Her blog is at Bridget Fitch 2112. She's a Rush fan too, actually.
I was going to say, Between the Wheels, Rush reference, yeah.
Bridget Fitch 2112.wordpress.com. I encourage y'all to go check that out. I've actually heard her talk on another show. It was on a different subject. It was emotional abuse or something, I think it was. But yeah, she has some great stories to tell. She's a good storyteller. So she's been there, and she likes to help people. I know that. So definitely go check out that blog. I'll put that link up.
And a female that likes Rush. Wow.
Yeah,
I'm impressed.
It's a rarity. It is. This last one I have here. I remember. Okay. She says she saw my post about the depression topic and thought she'd share with me what happened when she went to the doctor yesterday to discuss depression/anxiety. I've read this already. This pisses me right the fuck off. Okay, this is why some doctors suck. Okay, first I have to clarify that I've never been diagnosed with anything. I was always too afraid to be honest about how I've been feeling, but I finally took the steps to seek help. I should also point out that I'm covered under Medi-Cal, which is California's version of Medicare. Yeah. Anyways, I decided to make an appointment with my primary care doctor to discuss these issues. During the course of our very one-sided conversation about my anxiety/depression and insomnia, her advice was to stay positive, have my job give me different hours, take a supplement, and quit drinking caffeine. She felt my lymph nodes and told me they seemed enlarged, but there was a lot of fatty tissue, so she can't really tell. Well, that's great. So you basically call me a fat ass. Great thing to tell somebody with anxiety, right? I managed to not Google swollen lymph nodes, so that's... My friend over here would not.
Yeah, no. The hypochondria on 10, yeah.
She sent me off with a stack of lab requests to test for diabetes because I'm obese, and to have my lymph nodes looked at via are you fucking kidding? Is that even a thing? Via ultrasound. My follow-up appointment is in 6 weeks.
Oh, that pisses me off.
If you want to look for a fucking caricature of how a doctor is not to act, a lesson on doctors should not act about mental illness, that's it right there.
That makes my stomach turn.
That shows just a lack of any sort of understanding. Your ass needs to go back to school or some shit. You need to be stripped of your license. I don't fucking know. So I talked to her after this, actually, and she's like, yeah, I actually made an appointment with an actual shrink. So she's actually going to get actual help from an actual doctor. Not this fucking California quack, which I will point out California is full of them. If you'll notice, the anti-vax movement is based in California, as is a bunch of that woo, namaste bullshit. But anyway, don't get me started and all that. That's a different subject for another day. So yeah, that really pisses me off when they start talking about you need to just basically you're fat or there's something physically wrong with you. There can't possibly be something mentally wrong with you. It's got to have. They don't even listen to you. They already have it fixed in their head that there's something else wrong. If you get a doctor like that, you need to run. Just don't even just out the door. Just don't say shit. Walk out the fucking door. Now, can we play that now?
Yeah.
I wanted to play this audio clip. Her name is Katie. She said I could use her name. Katie Canal. It's French. I tried to pronounce it 500 times to get it right, and I fucked it up probably. Anyway, she knows who it is. Katie Canal, and it's about 4 minutes long, so take a listen to it.
Hi, my name is Katie, and from the time I was in elementary school, I always wanted to be an actor. I've always been good at hiding my emotions, which is why a lot of people would be surprised to know that I suffer from depression and anxiety. Acting like everything is okay or as close to as I can muster. My calm demeanor has made it hard for me to convey to people close to me and a handful of psychiatrists how I truly feel. I feel like I know what is wrong with me, but when I try to tell people, they usually don't believe me because I don't seem asymptomatic. I've been diagnosed with anything from ADD to post-menstrual dysphoric disorder to seasonal depression. No one seems to know exactly what is wrong with me. I've been on my fair share of antidepressants and ADD meds, none of them seeming to do the trick and, quote, fix me. One time I told a shrink that I thought I was bipolar, and after our first session, I'd actually done a bunch of research into this before I had reached out and told him this. After our first session, they told me, I don't think you're bipolar, and diagnosed me with seasonal depression. I've been most recently diagnosed with major depressive disorder, but I also experience episodes of what I consider to be hypomania, a less dramatic form of mania. Most people who have type 2 bipolar disorder are able to live successfully without their mania affecting their everyday lives, but mine certainly does affect my life. A few times I almost walked out of my job and started driving for the coast. It's somewhat easier for me to write this down. For some reason, I can't remember the majority of my childhood, just small blurbs. I attended a family reunion last year, and they had pictures posted of me at the last family reunion, which I have zero memory of attending, and I was 14 then. I don't know if this is normal, but it doesn't seem like it to me. Also, I sometimes remember things that I am convinced happened, but no one else can remember. I tell myself that people must have really bad memories, but Here I am, blowing people off because I can't remember making plans with them 2 days ago. I can sometimes suffer from delusions and hallucinations, especially when I'm going off my antidepressants against my doctor's advice, but I tend to do that. I can go from timid and paranoid to angry and defiant to depressed and absolutely hopeless in a matter of minutes to hours. Sometimes these moods can last a few weeks at a time, though. It doesn't take much to set me off either. Someone could say something I don't like and it will send me spiraling either into depression or anger. Most days I barely drag myself out of bed at the last minute. Rarely find time to do things like shower or bother to take care of myself. Sometimes I'm more sensitive, like I get in a kind of non-verbal mood. I just like to, if I could, possibly write things down or use sign language to communicate with people, but sometimes that's not always a possibility. I also get really kind of weirded out when people get in like my personal space or like someone will rub up against me in public. It just makes me really uncomfortable. I often believe that people are out to get me or following me home. All these things are made harder by the fact that I'm a skeptic, and the reasonable part of my brain is constantly fighting with the ego part, and it just makes it worse, because I end up hating myself because of it. In all of this, you might think that my atheism has probably not helped, and while it has sent me into spiraling into a lifelong existential crisis, atheism has literally saved my life. It saved my life because I believe that this life is all that we've got, and no matter how shitty it gets, I might as well stick around and see what happens next. Otherwise, if I truly believed in an afterlife, I would have checked out a long time ago.
So that was Katie, Kano. I hope I got that shit right. I wanted to thank her very much for sending me that and for letting me use her name. I think it's pretty awesome that you have the courage to do that. Not many people do.
Yeah.
Some of the things you mentioned I've gone through personally. I don't like people who I don't know necessarily all up in my fucking personal space. That's not something I've always been a fan of. A lot of if I get into phases where I don't want to take a shower for like a fucking week, I just don't have the energy to do anything. Yeah, so I work 2 jobs, so that makes it even worse because I'm already tired, and plus the other shit just piles onto it. The memory thing is, I mean, that may be an atypical thing. I don't know. But certainly, it could be a symptom. I'm not a therapist or anything, so I can't diagnose you, and I wouldn't want to. But I would like to tell her and anybody else who is going through any kind of shit like this that they need, they can find somebody to talk to. Just don't go find a fucking doctor like the last person and tells you that you're fat and you probably have diabetes and your lymph nodes are fatty and shit like that. But I think the sense of alienation and the sense of failure a lot of times accompanies this sort of thing. So I don't think that's unusual. So that's not something I think we need to take away from this whole... If I were to take away anything from this episode, it'd be that you shouldn't feel alone. You shouldn't feel like you're the only person going through this shit. There are a lot of people like you who have been going through this and have gone through this. And you're doing great because you're still alive and you're still kicking and you're still trying to get through shit. This is the toughest battle you'll ever go through probably in your life. And the fact that you're getting through it and you're still able to function. If you have a job, I have 2 fucking... I don't want to kiss my own ass. My depression isn't nearly as bad as a lot of people's. Mine has kind of calmed down over the years. I guess because as you get older, maybe your metabolism slows down. I don't know. Whatever bullshit. Something like that. I don't know. It's not... My anxiety is not as nearly as bad as it used to be. So...
Yeah, and me, it's been... It's in recent years, it's been a lot easier for me, too. I haven't been on antidepressants for quite a number of years now. I don't know. Like you said, I don't know if it's just part of getting older. Maybe we're just used to it. I don't know, but I find that I'm better able to deal with it. I don't have I still have my moments, my not so great moments, but it's a little bit easier for me to get past it. I guess having lived with this my entire life, I've kind of I have some tools in place now to make it a little bit easier, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so to kind of, I guess, wrap things up a little bit, like I said, if you need help, don't hesitate. There's support groups, and especially nowadays with social networking and stuff, it's easier than ever to find people to talk to. Don't ever hesitate to reach out to anybody if you're in trouble, if you need help, because I mean, it's not, things can happen, and you don't want to spiral into a suicidal situation. And of course, you can contact me if you want, or whoever,
me.
or Eric. Is it Marman89? Is that something? Marman89@gmail.com. Also, I had the one thing I wanted, like I said, if you are ever considering suicide, for one thing, that's not an unusual feeling. So don't feel like you're just strange or something.
Going crazy or something.
And don't afraid to tell anybody this, okay? You can call the Prevention Lifeline, and it says, we can help prevent suicide. It's 24/7 free and confidential support for people in distress, prevention and crisis resources for you or your loved ones, and best practices for professionals who are dealing with it. The number is 1-800-273-8255, and I think the 8255 spells talk, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's 273 talk. So yeah, first line of defense, if it's life or death, you need to call this fucking number. If you don't feel comfortable talking to them, talk to somebody you know immediately, because your life is important, and you're an important person on this planet. So don't. And as I assume most people listening to the show are an atheist, and that's fine. But if you're a believer, that's fine too. I don't give a fuck. Whoever you are, call this fucking number and get the help you need. Now, if you're just kind of wanting to find more information in general, there's a group called adaa.org, and I'm pretty dumb for not remembering what the hell that stands for. But I know the link gives a ton of resources. It's Ask and Learn resources. And it's resources for finding more about depression, where you can find out people to help, different organizations that help with depression and anxiety, all that kind of stuff. And of course, I'll put that link up on the show notes or whatever. But as I said before, if you have any problems, if you are experiencing any depression, any sort of where you need to talk to somebody, find somebody to talk to. Look at the link I said. Like I said, there's a lot of resources there. But if you just, if you got a friend or something who you feel comfortable talking to about this kind of stuff, just talking in general helps, Yeah. Just getting the shit out. I mean, writing is therapeutic. A lot of people get therapy from just writing the shit down. Even if you don't necessarily send it or anything, I mean, it's getting the shit out on paper, or out of your mind into the real world, kind of. It's like it gives it form. It gives it a concrete form almost. So you just don't feel like you're just making this shit up. It's out there, and it's there, and you can deal with it more easily. It's Anxiety and Depression Association of America. That's ADAA. You can go to their own page, which I'll put up on the adaa.org. But I also put up that specific link to the resources page. So I guess that's it. Eric, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, anytime. Definitely.
Thanks for sharing your tales of
woe,
tales of adventure in crazy land. And I want to thank y'all for listening to the show. It really means a lot that somebody's listening. I really enjoy doing it. And if any of y'all need somebody to talk to, I'm always here. You can email the page. The information I always put at the end of every show. You can call the hotline. Nobody ever calls the fucking thing, but you can call it. So just remember, if you don't talk to me, fucking please talk to somebody. You're too important of a person to just let the shit go. That'll do it for the Podunk Polymath Podcast, episode 12. I want to thank my friend Eric Parsons for coming on and doing this with me. I did want to mention that the mic sounds different because we're using his condenser mic, and there's echo, and I can't get rid of it, so I don't think it's too bad. And you'll also notice he was on the intro for the last episode is because I record the palaver a week ahead of time, but I record the intro and outro the week of, so that's why it's kind of weird like that. But I hope y'all enjoyed the episode. I don't know if enjoy is really the way. I hope y'all gained something out of it, got something out of it. It was really therapeutic for me to do it, and he agreed. And I think just talking, like I said before, just talking shit out a lot of times helps people get through it. Anybody needs to talk, you can call me, you can email me, or whatever. Message me on Facebook. Of course, you can get a hold of the show. podunk.polymath@gmail.com is the email address. I'm also on Google+, Twitter, and Facebook as the Podunk Polymath. Of course, the music was done by ... You can check them out at cdbaby.com/cd/... You can go check them out on Facebook. The link's on the About page at podunkpolymath.com. I'm not going to read the URL because it's just not easily said and you won't remember it anyway. So go check it out. Of course, you can go on the main page, and there's buttons for subscribing to Google Play, Stitcher, and iTunes. Of course, you can donate through PayPal. You can become a member of the Posse on Patreon. There's a button there for that, too. Of course, you can follow the blog on WordPress. There's a button for that. You can see the latest posts, comments. And, of course, there's the call-in line. It's on the About page in podunkpolymath.com, but it slipped my mind right this moment. But I know the last four numbers is 7676, which stands for freedom, and that spells Popo. So it's like a double entendre, basically. Again, I want to reiterate, I know I keep saying this, but if you need help, if you need anybody to talk to, of course, you can talk to me, but I would encourage you, if you're in imminent danger, to call a suicide hotline, or if you need somebody that's professional to talk to, go search that out, because I'm obviously not a trained therapist or anything. I'm just some random guy, so take care of yourself, and you don't have to suffer alone. That's all I'm going to say. So until next time, y'all take it easy, okay?